On my lunch break, I saw my husband with our neighbor inside my bathtub. So I locked them inside and called her husband to come over. There are specific moments in life that change you forever in the blink of an eye. They are these shattering instants where everything you thought you knew about your world crumbles right in front of your face, leaving you standing in the wreckage. Mine arrived on a completely ordinary Tuesday when I decided to drive home to pick up some paperwork I had foolishly left behind. Before I go any further with this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Please write your city or state in the comments below because I absolutely love discovering how far these life-changing stories travel. My name is Josephine Bell, and I was a 34-year-old woman who truly believed she was living a perfect life. I had 8 years of marriage under my belt and a beautiful townhouse in a quiet subdivision just on the edge of the city. I had neighbors that I considered close friends. I worked as a claims adjuster for a major insurance company, and my routine was predictable, comfortable, and safe. That morning, I had rushed out the door in a frenzy just like I always did. Jackson Scott, my husband, stayed behind in his home office, which is what he had been doing for the last few months. Welcome to Greta's Stories, where I share new life stories every single day. If you subscribe and like my video, it really means the world to me. Now, let us get back to the story that I am sure will keep you hooked until the very end. "I will see you tonight, honey," Jackson shouted to me from his study as I closed the front door. I never in a million years could have dreamed that those would be the last normal words spoken between us. What I was about to discover upon my return would not only destroy my marriage, but it would alter my entire sense of self forever. My life was like a well-oiled machine, precise, organized, and without surprises. Every morning at 6:30, I brewed the coffee while Jackson took his shower. We ate breakfast together while watching the morning news. I drove to work, and he stayed in his makeshift office in our guest room. We lived in a 2-story house in a manicured cul-de-sac. I had chosen every piece of furniture, every paint color, and every decorative detail with almost obsessive care. It was my sanctuary, the place where I felt safest in the world. The neighbors were like family, especially Caroline Collins, who lived directly across the street with her husband Lincoln and their 2 small children. Caroline and I had become very close since they moved in 3 years ago. We drank coffee together on Sundays and borrowed ingredients from each other while cooking dinner. I watered her flowers when they went on vacation. I trusted her completely. I trusted Jackson completely. I trusted my life completely. That blind trust would turn out to be my greatest mistake, and paradoxically, my greatest gift. That morning, there was something different in the air, but I could not put my finger on exactly what it was. Jackson seemed more nervous than usual during breakfast. He was constantly checking his phone, and when I asked him if everything was okay, he just gave me evasive answers. I drove to the office with a strange knot in my stomach. All morning while I was processing insurance policies, I could not shake this feeling of unrest. I called Jackson to see if we should grab lunch together, but his line was busy. As I was sorting through some files, I realized I had left important documents at home, documents that I absolutely needed for an afternoon meeting. I had no choice but to drive back to get them. I told my boss I needed to step out for an hour to handle a personal matter. The drive from the office to my house took barely 15 minutes. I thought I would just run inside, grab the papers, maybe grab a quick bite with Jackson and then head back to work. Life has a cruel way of laughing at our simplest plans. When I pulled up to the house, the first thing I noticed was Caroline's car parked in my driveway. That is strange, I thought, because she always parked in front of her own house directly across the street. I unlocked the front door with my key, and the silence hit me immediately. The house was too quiet for 2 people to be inside. Jackson always listened to music when he worked, and if Caroline was visiting, I would expect to hear laughter or conversation. "Jackson," I called out from the hallway. No one answered. I walked into the kitchen thinking maybe they were in the backyard, but there was no sign of them. Their shoes were not in the hallway, which was customary when Caroline visited. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink exactly how I had left them that morning. Then I heard something that made the blood freeze in my veins. It was the sound of running water in the master bathroom that I had shared with Jackson for 8 years. My first instinct was to think Jackson was just taking a shower, but something did not fit. Where was Caroline? Why was her car here if she was not? The questions multiplied in my mind as I climbed the stairs, unaware that every step was bringing me closer to the moment that would divide my life into a before and an after. I walked upstairs with my heart racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe Caroline had come over to borrow something, and Jackson offered her our bathroom because hers was broken. Maybe there was an emergency and she needed to shower for some reason I could not comprehend. My mind clung desperately to any explanation that would keep my happy world intact. I walked down the hall to our bedroom. The door was cracked open and the sound of the water was louder. But now I could hear something else. Voices quiet, whispering, intimate voices. My hand shook as I approached the door. Part of my brain screamed at me to stop, to turn around and go back to the office, to pretend I had never been here. Do not open that door, because deep down I knew that what I would find on the other side would change everything forever. But the other part of me, the part that needed to know the truth no matter how much it hurt, pushed me forward. I placed my hand on the bathroom door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open gently with a movement that seemed to happen in slow motion. What I saw on the other side of that door was not just a betrayal. It was the death of the woman I had been up until that moment. There is no possible preparation for the moment your reality dissolves completely. There is no manual that teaches you how to react when you catch the two people you trusted most, abusing that trust in the most intimate way possible. There they were, Jackson and Caroline, in my bathtub, in my house and my sanctuary. Their bodies were intertwined, completely cut off from the outside world, lost in their own bubble of deceit. The water ran over them as they kissed with a passion I had not seen from Jackson in years. His hands roamed over her body with a familiarity that could only mean one thing. This was not the first time. For a moment, I was paralyzed. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was like I was watching a movie. Something that could not be real, that could not be happening in my life. But then Caroline opened her eyes and saw me standing in the doorway. Her face shifted in a split second from lust to pure horror. Jackson followed her gaze, and when he saw me, he froze. "Josephine," he muttered as if saying, my name could magically undo what had just been revealed. In that moment, something broke inside me, but it was not what I expected. It was not my heart that broke. It was the chains of the submissive and trusting woman I had been until then. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not collapse like they probably expected. A strange, almost supernatural calm took possession of me. It was as if I had stepped out of my own body and was watching the scene from above, completely detached from the emotions I was supposed to feel. "Stay exactly where you are," I said with a voice I did not recognize as my own. It was cold, controlled, and powerful. Jackson tried to climb out of the tub. "Josephine, wait. I can explain." "Do not move," I repeated, and something in my tone made him stop immediately. I closed the bathroom door with a decisive movement, and without hesitating for a second, I turned the key in the lock. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot through the silence. "Josephine, what are you doing?" Caroline's voice sounded panicked from the other side of the door. "Stay in there and think about what you have done," I answered, surprising myself with the coldness of my words. "In the meantime, I am going to make a few phone calls." I walked to my nightstand, picked up my cell phone, and looked for a number in my contacts. A number I had dialed hundreds of times for trivial things. Dinner invitations, neighborhood helped casual chats, but never for something like this. Lincoln answered on the second ring. "Hello, Josephine? How are you?" "Hello, Lincoln," answered with the same terrifying calm. "I need you here at my house immediately. There is something you need to see." While I waited for Lincoln to arrive, I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed I had shared with Jackson for 8 years, and I let the reality hit me with full force. The signs had been there all along. Jackson working from home more often, his visits to the gym getting longer and longer, the way he had been putting his phone away lately when I came near the extra showers he took to relax after work. And Caroline. Sweet Caroline, who always found excuses to come over when Jackson was home, who had suddenly started dressing differently. More flirtatious, especially on the days I was working. She knew details about Jackson's routine that I had never told her. Desperate whispers came from the bathroom along with the sound of them gently knocking on the door. "Josephine, please. This is insanity," Jackson said. "Let us out so we can talk like adults." Adults. The word made me laugh. Adults were the ones sleeping with the neighbor's wife in their own wife's house. Adults were the ones constructing elaborate lies to hide their betrayal. My phone vibrated. A message from Lincoln saying he had left work. I replied telling him to just come inside. I would explain when he got here. In those minutes of waiting, I did something I had never done in my life. I checked Jackson's phone. He had left it on the nightstand when he went to shower. It had no passcode. After 8 years of marriage, we believed in total transparency. What an irony. What I found there confirmed that this betrayal went much deeper than I had imagined. The messages between Jackson and Caroline went back more than 6 months. 6 months full of good morning, beautiful, and I cannot stop thinking about you. 6 months of carefully orchestrated plans to meet when I was not around. 6 months of laughing about how clueless I was, how easy it was to deceive me. "Josephine is so naive," Caroline had written. "I think we could do it in the living room and she would not notice. That is what I love about you." Jackson had replied that you are the opposite of her adventurous, spontaneous fun. But the message that tore me apart internally was one from just 2 days ago. "Do you think we should tell them?" Caroline asked. "Sometimes I feel guilty about Josephine. She is such a good person." "Not yet," Jackson had replied. "I need to make sure she does not take half of everything in the divorce when I break up with her. Give me a few more weeks." I read that message 3 times before the words really sank into my brain. They were not just cheating on me. They were planning to ruin my life financially. Then the doorbell rang. Lincoln was here. I walked down the stairs with trembling legs, clutching Jackson's phone tightly as evidence. Through the window, I could see Lincoln standing on my porch, his brow furrowed, visibly worried about mysterious call. Lincoln was a good man, hard-working, devoted to his family, completely infatuated with Caroline. I had seen him with his children carrying them when they got hurt, staying up at night when they were sick. He deserved the truth just as much as I needed to know it. I opened the door and saw him standing there in his work uniform as a plant mechanic. He had probably run from some job site to see what emergency I had. His eyes showed genuine concern. "Josephine, what is going on? You sounded very serious on the phone. Is everything okay?" For a moment, I hesitated. As soon as I spoke the words, there would be no going back. Lincoln's life would also be in pieces. His children would have to deal with their parents divorcing. His whole world would collapse just like mine. But he deserved the truth. "Lincoln," I said, and I surprised myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Caroline is here inside my house with my husband. I caught them together." I watched as the words took a few seconds to land in Lincoln's brain. His expression shifted from concern to confusion, then to disbelief, and finally to a painful understanding that I recognized perfectly because I had just gone through the same thing. "What do you mean together?" he asked, even though he knew exactly what I meant by my tone. "I found them in my bathtub," I answered softly. "I locked them inside. They are waiting for us to decide what we are going to do." Lincoln leaned heavily against the doorframe of the master bedroom as if the bones in his legs had suddenly turned to water. His face, usually so warm and full of life, had gone completely ashen, drained of all color. "How long?" he murmured, his voice barely audible over the humming of the air conditioning. I handed him Jackson's smartphone without saying a word. According to what I had just read, it had been going on for at least 6 months, perhaps even longer. As Lincoln scrolled through the thread, I watched his world disintegrate in real time. It was the same hollow look I must have worn only minutes prior. That same devastating mixture of disbelief and betrayal. The sickening realization that the life you thought was solid ground was actually quicksand. "Oh my God," he whispered, bringing a trembling hand to his mouth. "The kids. Josephine, how am I supposed to explain this to the kids?" It was the first time since walking into that bathroom that I witnessed someone else experiencing the raw, jagged edge of this pain, and strangely, it made me feel less alone in the nightmare. We moved downstairs to the living room, needing to get away from the physical proximity of our spouses. We sat on my beige sectional, surrounded by framed memories that now felt like they were mocking us. There were photos of Jackson and me cutting our wedding cake, photos of our 2 families on vacation together in Myrtle Beach, and snapshots from Christmas parties where we were all laughing in matching pajamas like one big happy clan. It had all been a performance. "I need to understand," Lincoln said, his voice cracking. "When did this start? How could I have been so blind?" We huddled together over Jackson's phone, scrolling back to create a timeline of the treason. The first romantic exchange had happened the night of a dinner party right here in this house. I remembered that evening perfectly because we had laughed until our sides hurt. We had played spades and finished 3 bottles of wine. Apparently, after Lincoln and I had gone to sleep, Jackson had walked Caroline back to her house, and that was where the line was crossed. A kiss on her front porch while her children slept upstairs and her husband trusted her completely. The messages revealed a sordid map of their infidelity. There were meetups in cheap motel off the interstate during my work hours, quick encounters in Caroline's SUV and secluded park and ride lots, and even trysts in my own home on days when I had all-day executive meetings. "Look at this," Lincoln said, pointing to a timestamp with a shaking finger. "Last Saturday, I took the boys to the zoo because Caroline said she had a migraine. I felt a wave of nausea. That same Saturday, Jackson told me he was going to play pickup basketball at the gym with the guys. He came home sweating and exhausted. I thought he had been exercising, but they had perfected the art of deception. They had synchronized their lies, provided each other with bulletproof alibis, and woven a web of deceit so intricate it would have impressed a professional con artist. But what cut the deepest wasn't the physical details, it was the calculation. Jackson had been coldly plotting how to leave me with absolutely nothing. He had been researching divorce loopholes in our state, looking up how to hide assets in cryptocurrency accounts, and asking his lawyer buddies for strategies to protect his 401k in case of a split. Then we found something that shifted the atmosphere in the room from sad to terrifying. Among the most recent texts, we discovered that Jackson and Caroline weren't just planning their respective divorces. They were planning to merge their lives. I found the perfect townhouse. Caroline had written 3 bedrooms so the boys can visit. It is in the catchment area for the magnet school just in case we decide to fight for full custody later. "Perfect," Jackson had replied. "As soon as I am free of Josephine and you drop Lincoln, we can start our real life. No more secrets, no more lies." Lincoln read that message out loud, his voice dripping with a bitterness that seemed to slice through the air. "No more lies," he repeated, staring at the wall. After 6 months of nothing but lies, they want to build a relationship on truth. It got worse. It turned out Caroline had been feeding Jackson intimate details about Lincoln. Things only a wife should know. She told him about Lincoln's insecurities at work, his anxiety about providing for the family, and even private moments of vulnerability in their bedroom. Jackson had mocked Lincoln in the texts, using the information Caroline provided to make himself feel superior. "She is using you," I said softly to Lincoln. "They are using us both as punchlines to their private jokes." In that moment, something shifted in Lincoln's eyes. The grief hardened into cold resolve. "You know what?" he said, standing up from my sofa. It is time we go upstairs and have a conversation. We stayed seated for just a second longer. Michael and Josephine, two victims of the same crime, bonded by a trauma we never asked for. It was strange how suffering could forge an instant connection between two people who, until an hour ago, were just polite neighbors who waved at the mailbox. You know what hurts the most, Lincoln said, staring at a photo of our four families grilling in the backyard. It isn't just that she cheated, it is that she made me an accomplice without me knowing. Every time I let her come over here because she said Josephine needed company. Every time I watched the kids so she could help you with a project. Every time I let you cook dinner for the four of us thinking we were friends. I was facilitating my own betrayal. I understood exactly what he meant. I had been an accomplice too. Every time I worked overtime so Jackson could relax at home. Every time I defended Caroline when Lincoln complained she was going out too much. Every time I celebrated how lucky I was to have such wonderful neighbors. It is not our fault, I said, saying it as much for myself as for him. We operated with integrity. They chose to betray us. Lincoln nodded slowly. But now we get to choose how we respond. He was right. This was our moment to decide who we would be in the wreckage. We climbed the stairs together, side by side, united by a grim determination I had never felt before. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman who had just discovered her spine. As we reached the hallway, the sounds coming from the master bathroom had changed. It was no longer desperate, hushed, whispering. It was a full-blown argument. This is your fault, Caroline hissed through the wood. You promised me she never came home for lunch on Tuesdays. My fault, Jackson shot back, his voice rising. You were the one who insisted on coming over today. We could have waited until tonight like usual. I am sick of waiting, Caroline screamed. I am sick of cheap motel and rushing around. You said you would have had the papers ready by now. Lincoln and I looked at each other. Even now, trapped and exposed, they were turning on each other instead of taking responsibility. Jackson yelled from inside, Josephine, I know you are out there. Please, we can settle this in a civilized manner. Let us out and we can talk like mature adults. Lincoln stepped up to the door, his shadow falling across the wood. Jackson, he said, his voice deeper and more terrifying than I had ever heard it. This is Lincoln. I think you and my wife have some explaining to do. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Lincoln. Caroline's voice sounded small, like a child caught stealing candy. Lincoln, baby, let me explain. I am waiting, he replied with a calmness that mirrored my own earlier state. It isn't what it looks like, Caroline stammered. Lincoln let out a short, dark laugh. Caroline, you are naked in our neighbor's bathtub with her husband. Exactly. Which part of that isn't what it looks like? But then Jackson spoke, and what he said sucked the air right out of the hallway. Lincoln, Josephine, look, you have to understand. This is more complicated than you think. Caroline and I, we fell in love. It wasn't planned. It just happened. In love, I repeated the words in my head. A fire ignited in my chest, hot and consuming. They fell in love while lying to our faces for half a year. We knew it was messy, Jackson continued, sounding almost self-righteous, but we couldn't control our feelings. We wanted to tell you both. We were just waiting for the right moment. Lincoln slammed his fist against the door, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The right moment, he roared. You mean like after you signed the lease on that townhouse you already found? After you made sure Josephine wouldn't get a dime in the divorce? After you decided if my sons would live with you? The silence on the other side of the door confirmed we had hit the bullseye. How do you know that? Caroline whispered, and in her shaky voice, I could hear the realization that her carefully constructed fantasy was collapsing around her ears. Text messages, I replied simply, very detailed. Very illuminating. What followed was a chorus of desperate backtracking. Jackson yelled that the messages were taken out of context. Caroline insisted she never seriously meant to move the kids. Both of them tried to shrink the enormity of what we had discovered, trying to make it small enough to forgive. But Lincoln and I were done listening to the spin. We stared at our phones, reading message after message that documented not just their physical affair, but their financial and emotional conspiracy against us. "Josephine," Lincoln said quietly, leaning close, "does your phone have a voice memo app?" I nodded, understanding his plan instantly. "Good, because I think you should record some of these confessions for our lawyers." I pulled up the app, hit the red button, and tapped gently on the door. "Jackson, Caroline, could you repeat that part about being in love, and maybe clarify the timeline about waiting for the right moment to leave us destitute? My divorce attorney is going to find this fascinating." The panic in their voices as the legal reality set in was the sweetest sound I had heard all year. Lincoln and I walked back downstairs, leaving them locked in with their recorded confessions and their rising terror. We sat back down on the sofa, two people who had woken up with very different lives that morning, now forging a path through the wreckage together. "What do we do now?" he asked me. For the first time since I turned that door knob, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but a smile of recognition. I realized I wasn't the defenseless housewife they thought I was. "Now," I said, checking the battery level on my phone, "we give them exactly what they deserve." I started building a call list, my lawyer, Lincoln's lawyer, our bosses, to explain why we wouldn't be returning to the office this afternoon. And surprisingly, Caroline's mother. "You are going to call her mom?" Lincoln asked, eyebrows raised. "Her mom watched her kids yesterday while Caroline pretended to be sick." I reminded him. "She deserves to know why she was really babysitting." Lincoln nodded slowly. "You are right, and I am going to call Jackson's boss. I am sure he will be interested to know why his VP of sales has had so many doctor's appointments lately." It was time for the consequences to catch up with the actions. Over the next hour, Lincoln and I orchestrated a campaign of total transparency. First, the lawyers. My attorney was practically giddy when I described the evidence. "Josephine, this is gold," she told me. "Documented adultery, conspiracy to hide assets, and confessions on tape. Jackson won't be able to dictate a single term." Lincoln's lawyer was equally optimistic about his custody chances. Then came the harder calls. Caroline's mother was devastated when I explained why her daughter's marriage was ending. "I always felt something was off," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Caroline has been so distant, so secretive." Jackson's boss reacted with professional fury when he learned his employee had been faking medical emergencies to meet a married woman. "That is a violation of company ethics, and it is essentially theft of company time," he assured me. "There will be immediate HR implications, likely termination for cause." While we made these calls, the noise from the bathroom intensified. Jackson and Caroline had cycled from making excuses to begging, then to threats, and back to pathetic pleading. "Josephine, please," Jackson shouted, his voice. 8 years of marriage has to mean something. We can go to counseling. We can fix this." Lincoln Caroline sobbed. "Think about the boys. Don't destroy our family over one mistake. One mistake. 6 months of calculated lies." And she called it a mistake. "You know what?" I said to Lincoln as I hung up the phone. "I think it is time to let them out." Lincoln looked at me surprised. "Are you sure?" "Completely," I said, feeling a surge of power I didn't know I possessed. "But first, we have to set the stage for the grand finale." It was time for them to face not just their spouses, but the full weight of their reality. I climbed the stairs for the 3rd time that day, but I was a different woman. I wasn't the naive Josephine coming home for lunch. I wasn't even the angry wife who found them. I was the narrator of my own life now, taking the pen back. Lincoln followed me, and we stood before the bathroom door. The noise inside had stopped. No more begging, just a heavy, dreadful silence. the sound of people realizing their world had ended. Before I turned the key, I looked at Lincoln and said, "I want you to know something." That experience changed me forever, and certainly not in the way they expected. Lincoln nodded at me from across the hallway, his eyes reflecting the same steel resolve I felt hardening in my own chest. He told me quietly that this nightmare had shown him he was stronger than he ever believed possible, and I knew exactly what he meant. I reached into the pocket of my jeans and wrapped my fingers around the cold metal of the key. It was the same key I had turned in a blind panic just an hour ago. An instinctive act of self-defense when my world was collapsing. But now, as I held it tight, the jagged edges digging into my palm, it represented something entirely different. It was no longer a tool for hiding. It represented my conscious, deliberate decision not just to open a door, but to unlock a terrifying and beautiful new chapter of my life. I took a deep breath that filled my lungs with a sudden surge of clarity. "Jackson, Caroline," I said clearly, my voice ringing through the wood of the master bathroom door. "You are going to come out now, but you need to understand that the rules have completely changed." I turned the key in the lock, the click sounding like a gunshot in the quiet house, and I stepped aside. The door opened slowly, almost hesitantly, and two people emerged who looked nothing like the competent, arrogant figures I had locked in there. The steam from the shower escaped with them, carrying the scent of my expensive body wash that she had felt entitled to use. They were no longer the secure conspiratorial lovers who had plotted to dismantle our marriages over secret lunches and stolen afternoons. They were just two shivering, exposed people who had just realized they had gambled everything that mattered and lost. Jackson came out first, wrapped hastily in one of our plush white bath towels. His eyes were red and rimmed with panic, wearing the expression of a man who was finally calculating the true cost of his arrogance. Caroline followed him, clutching a matching towel around her chest, trembling violently. She was shaking, not just from the damp cold of the air conditioning hitting her skin, but from the crushing realization that her life, as she knew, it was effectively over. Jackson reached his hand out toward me, a reflex of 8 years of intimacy, but I recoiled as if he were made of fire. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was calm, dangerously calm, a tone I had never heard come out of my own throat before. "You have absolutely no right to ever touch me again." Lincoln stood beside me, a towering pillar of judgment. Caroline tried to speak, her voice cracking. "Lincoln, honey, please just let me explain." Lincoln raised a hand, stopping her before she could spin another web. "There is nothing to explain, Caroline." And he set his voice flat and devoid of the warmth she was used to. "You have already explained everything very clearly in your text messages. You explained it in your coordinated plans to move in together. You explained it in the way you laughed about how clueless Josephine and I were. We had seen them naked in every sense of the word. We had seen them physically exposed in my bathtub, but more importantly, we had seen them emotionally naked in their begging and morally naked in their pathetic excuses. They held no power over us anymore because they held no mystery. The secrets that had fueled their affair were now the ammunition for their destruction. "Sit down," I ordered, pointing to the edge of the king-sized bed that Jackson and I had shared for nearly a decade. "Sit down, because you are going to listen to exactly what is going to happen next." They sat on the edge of the mattress like scolded schoolchildren, and for the first time in 8 years of marriage, Jackson did not argue with me. He did not question my authority or try to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. He was finally listening, but it was far too late for it to matter. First, I began pacing slowly in front of them, watching them shrink under my gaze. "You will both get dressed and you will leave my house immediately. Jackson, you can come back tomorrow to get your essential belongings, but you will only step foot on this property with a police escort or a neutral witness. I am changing the locks tonight. Second, I continued feeling every word stitch a piece of my dignity back together. Our lawyers have already been briefed on the entire situation. The text threads the audio recordings of your confessions through the door. The timeline of your financial maneuvering to hide assets. Everything has been documented and backed up to the cloud. Jackson, your little fantasy of leaving me with nothing during the divorce has just turned into your legal nightmare. I watched the color drain from his face, leaving him looking pale and sickly. Josephine, surely we can come to a civilized agreement, he stammered, trying to find his footing. Civilized? I repeated the word, tasting bitter on my tongue. How was it civilized to spend 6 months planning how to ruin my financial future? How was it civilized to mock me in private messages while eating the dinner I cooked? How was it civilized to use our home, our bed, and our life as a stage for your betrayal? Lincoln stepped forward, taking over the narrative with a cold precision. Caroline, your mother already knows why you really needed her to watch the kids yesterday. Your boss knows why you have been leaving work early so often to meet him, and the children will know that their father fought to keep this family together while their mother decided to burn it down. You cannot tell my children, Caroline protested, a sound of desperate panic rising in her throat. I do not have to tell them anything, Lincoln replied with a strength I had never seen in him before. Actions have consequences, Caroline, and yours are going to ripple through your family for a very long time. It was then that I did something neither of them expected. I walked right up to Jackson and looked him dead in the eyes. Do you know what hurts the most about all of this? I asked him softly, my voice barely above a whisper. It is not that you cheated on me. It is not that you planned to steal from me. It is not even that you used my own home to deceive me. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was suffocating. My voice gained power with every syllable. What hurts the most is that you completely underestimated who I am. Jackson looked at me confused, blinking rapidly. For 8 years, you treated me like I was weak, like I was stupid, like I was incapable of standing up for myself. Your entire plan hinged on me being the pathetic, oblivious wife you thought you married. But I was never that woman, Jackson. I just needed something to wake me up. I turned my head to look at Caroline, who was staring at the floor. And you, Caroline? You called yourself my friend while you plotted to destroy my life. You laughed at my innocence while I opened my home and my heart to you. You thought I was too dumb to notice the signs. But here I am standing tall, and you are the ones who have lost everything. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the woman I had been that morning, the one who worried about making the perfect pot roast. I was someone entirely new, someone who had found her voice, her spine, and her ability to stare betrayal in the face and emerge victorious. Now I said with a finality that sliced through the air, I want you to get dressed, leave my house, and never come back. Your story together started with lies, and it is ending with consequences. My story is just beginning. Lincoln turned to Caroline. You have 1 hour to pack a bag of essentials and leave our house, too. The lawyers will handle the rest. It was the most powerful moment of our lives. When they finally shuffled out the front door, looking small and defeated Lincoln, and I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by the debris of what our family lives had been. But strangely, I did not feel devastation. I felt a soaring sense of liberation. How do you feel? Lincoln asked me, turning to face me. I thought about the question for a long moment, listening to the silence of the house. I feel like I have been reborn. I answered honestly, as if I had been sleepwalking for years and finally just woke up. Lincoln smiled a genuine, tired smile. Me too. It is strange, isn't it? We should be on the floor crying, but I feel stronger than I have in years. He was right. The betrayal, as agonizing as it was, had been the catalyst we needed to discover who we really were. We were not the idealized, foolish versions our spouses had created in their heads, but capable, resilient people. That evening, after Lincoln went home to face his own challenges, I sat alone in my house, but I did not feel lonely. I felt free. I walked through every room, reclaiming my space, my sanctuary, my life. This house would no longer be the scene of a crime. It would be the place where a woman found her strength and decided to rewrite her history. The months that followed were a period of total reconstruction. The divorce was actually easier and faster than I had feared. Thanks to the mountain of evidence Jackson had so generously provided in his text messages, he had no leverage. He could not take a dime more than he was entitled to, and he lost the ability to hide assets, which resulted in a very favorable settlement for me. But the most important victory was not legal or financial. It was personal. Every day that passed without Jackson was a day I rediscovered who I was, without the constant, subtle criticism of a man who had spent years diminishing my worth. I went back to school in a way. I signed up for abstract painting classes that I had always wanted to take, but Jackson had called a waste of time and money. I traveled alone, taking a road trip up the California coast just to watch the ocean. I made new friends who knew me as the strong, independent woman I had become, not the submissive wife I used to be. Lincoln and I maintained a special friendship, bonded by the shared experience of discovering our power in our darkest moment. He flourished after his divorce, too, finding time to be the father his children needed without the complications of a toxic marriage. 1 year after that Tuesday, the day I started calling the awakening, I ran into Jackson at the grocery store. He looked older, tired, and worn down. His relationship with Caroline had not survived the guilt, the shame, and the financial ruin brought on by their own actions. "Josephine," he said, stopping his cart near the produce section. "I wanted to tell you that I am sorry for everything." I looked at him and realized with a jolt that I felt nothing. No anger, no love, no hate, just indifference. "I know," I answered, realizing it was true. "But I do not need your apology, Jackson. Your betrayal gave me the greatest gift you could have ever given me. It showed me who I really am." Today, as I share this story with you, 2 years have passed since that Tuesday that changed everything. My house has been completely renovated, not just physically with new paint and furniture, but energetically. It is now truly my sanctuary filled with art. I have created books that inspire me and memories of adventures I took on my own. The betrayal did not define me. My response to the betrayal defined me. I have learned that sometimes the most devastating moments of our lives are actually the most liberating. Sometimes our world has to fall apart so we can realize that we have the power to build a new and better one. Not all endings are happy in the traditional sense. My marriage ended, my trust was abused, and my life was turned upside down. But I found something much more valuable. I found myself. To every woman listening to this who feels lost in her own life, who feels invisible or unappreciated, who believes she does not have the strength to change her situation, I want to tell you this. Your strength is there waiting for you. It just needs the right moment to wake up. My story is not about revenge. It is about rebirth. It is about discovering that sometimes when we think we have lost everything, we are actually on the verge of gaining everything. The betrayal gave me my freedom, and my freedom gave me my true life. If this story touched your heart, or if it made you reflect on your own inner strength, then it has served its purpose. Because every woman deserves to know that she is more powerful than she believes. It has been a true pleasure to have you here, and to be able to share my journey with you. If you enjoyed my story, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how strong our community can grow. Feel free to write in the comments what city you are listening from and what time it is there. I am always so curious to see where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me further, you can also check the link in the description on my channel. I share new life stories every single day, just for you. Right now, 2 of my most popular stories are appearing on your screen, so you can keep listening right away. Take care of yourselves.